Welcome to the Angry Habs Fan Podcast Show. This is episode 4, broadcasting to you live from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It is Sunday, October 2nd, 2016. On this week's show, in the first segment, we will look at the World Cup or the Olympics. Follow the money. In it, we will look at the World Cup that just went by. We'll analyze it. We'll see how it went in a general way, not looking at any particular teams. We'll look at the economics of the situation vis-a-vis, of course, the Olympics. The Olympics coming up in Korea in a year and a half. The NHL has yet to make a decision, which is why it generated so much discussion this week. So we will break that down and analyze the situation and try to make a prediction on what the NHL will decide. And you can find all that information in the first segment. Our second segment this week will be the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is a weekly segment, and this will be the final World Cup edition. And in the good, bad, and ugly, we will look at the final games between Team Europe and Team Canada. We will also look at some more general points as well, since it's all over, that we didn't touch on in the first segment. So you can find all your World Cup analysis as far as players, Hab players, Price, Weber, so on and so forth in our second segment. Of course, our third segment is going to be the weekly Habitant, Montreal Canadiens news. Training camp edition. Last week, right after our show, Montreal Canadiens opened their official training camp, rookie training camp finished, and they've put 3 exhibition games under their belt. They've even made cuts today, so definitely some updates to be made there, and we'll look at some players that are looking good. It's early, and we'll be totally covering the training camp in that section. So, again, I'd like to apologize for last week, quickly, for the delay. I said I wanted to aim for Monday mornings. I still am aiming for that. We had, again, some splicing issues. I know I'm getting tired of saying it myself, but it did delay the episode. If ever there are delays or the show isn't out on time and you're wondering where is it, you can follow us on Twitter. I update on Twitter. My Twitter handle is found in the description. I would also like to say, if you're interested in leaving comments, please do, or suggestions. Last week we had a suggestion to divide our show, to time code it so that it was easier to find different segments that might interest different people. So we've done that. You could find that in the description. And if you're listening on YouTube, you could just click the time and it brings you right there. I'm still trying to figure out how to embed it into the actual play bar. Fancy people that know what they're doing know how to do that. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. Let's move quickly this week. I find myself doing too long intros and conclusions. So we'll move into our first segment, the World Cup or the Olympics. Follow the money. So the World Cup just finished. I enjoyed it. It was a good World Cup. The hockey was very good. It was excellent rosters on display from all countries. We got to see young players. We got to see older players. I found the elite was out in full force. It was a really good World Cup on that front. Now, why did everyone show up? Well, that's another question. I think most players showed up this year for a few reasons, particularly 2. The first being the uncertainty over the Olympics in a year and a half. I think players are showing up to their respective nations' hockey programs to say, I am willing and able. I'm ready to go to the Olympics for you. And there's no hiding that hockey players hold going to the Olympics quite highly. Getting a gold medal, having a chance at it is something many professional athletes have their eye on. So this year being not an Olympic year, we might have another World Cup next year. I can guarantee you next year at the next World Cup, if that's the case, if the Olympics are still on the table, we basically watched pretty much the same lineups that would show up next year. There were people that didn't show up this year, but the no-shows this year were generally injured. I can't even think of one case where someone said no, just because they felt like taking a longer vacation, or, there was no talk of I need to heal some bumps and bruises. It seemed like everyone showed up, and so the rosters were heavily laden with elites. And I say that because it brings me to my second point. Apart from the Olympics, all these players that participated in this tournament have a huge jump on the entire rest of the NHL. Here's basically what I'm going to call an elite training camp. You show up a month before and you're practicing hard, you're playing at very high levels against the best players in the world for, at least 2 weeks, and if not a month. And those players are going to come into the regular season of the NHL, I think, pretty much coming out of the gates hard. They're going to be ready. They're going to be intense. I mentioned earlier I have a pool tip to give. Well, here it is. Keep your eye on anyone who played in the World Cup. Obviously, it's not really a tip when all the best players in the NHL played, pretty much. But, if they didn't, I would be much less on them. For example, let me just give you an example. I can predict right now that Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand are going higher in all our pools. There's always one or two guys who, just get into the hype and pick the players higher, and they'll go higher now. Do I think they'll be some of the best offensive players in the NHL this year? They played with Crosby, and Bergeron and Marchand to me are consistent 60 to 70 point players, and I don't see this year being any different. So I think that's a mistake picking them high. A small pool tip there. Keep your eye on the World Cup players, particularly the World Cup players that played extremely well. Guys like obviously Crosby. Crosby is obviously the number one pick. And there's others, there's, Jonathan Toews looks great. Getzlaf looked good. Corey Perry looked good. Stamkos looked good, even though he's a bit snake bitten. These are all players, obviously that'll go high, but, I think should go even higher if possible. Anyways, so good rosters. I think there's reasons for that, but there is a grain of salt on that. If the Olympics don't happen in Korea, if the NHL backs out, I think the dynamics of the World Cup rosters will change. The year after the Olympics, for example, or the minute it's announced, if it's announced, it has to be announced this year. So, for example, if this year they announce that there's no Olympics next year in Korea for the NHL, and they do have a World Cup next year, I guarantee you it won't be the same rosters. It won't be the same quality. You can pretty much say goodbye to anyone who goes to the Stanley Cup final, because to ask them to come back in 2 months and play high quality hockey, it becomes less important. And people might say, well, you're not being very patriotic. You have to show up for your country and play. Yeah, that's true. But, these players also have multi-million-dollar contracts with their local teams. And, sometimes that becomes important too. And these players also want to win Stanley Cups. And, and this will lead me to my next point quite nicely, which is I found at this World Cup there was a definite lack of passion, of emotion. I found it tough to myself get into hockey in September. I spoke about this last week. I can't remember ever caring about hockey in September. I'm usually enjoying the last sun rays, and the Habs training camps start, and I start following that. But there's never any international hockey that I've been like, wow, that's so important. We have to win and be the world champions. Found it hard again this year. Like the other day I was talking, and we are world champions because we won this World Cup, but I actually found myself hesitating to say that because I just didn't feel like I was like, we're the champions of the world, not like we did after Vancouver or other times. It was more of a, I'm happy we won. I'm happy there was hockey, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like I was like, oh my God, this is so important, and I would say the evidence was everywhere that I wasn't the only one. As far as Toronto goes, and I certainly don't blame Toronto fans for this, though I, would blame them for the lack of ambiance during their Toronto Maple Leaf games, but that's a whole different story. I found at times, especially in the final, you could hear a pin drop, and that's just weird. It's weird from a Canadian's point of view when you're playing this hockey game that's supposed to be so important. And, it's just, I know we were losing 1-0 and people were worried, and, but usually Canadian fans really get into the game and support their team no matter what. And it's very raucous. And I don't think you can just blame Toronto for that. There were many outdoor shots of that square that a lot of people go to watch hockey games. And if this was an important World Cup game, World Champion game, and there was nobody out there, there was scattering of people, and Canada was in the final. You're in the heart of Toronto, and it was kind of funny watching the commentators talk about the Blue Jays and how the Blue Jays were kind of cutting into the passion for this tournament. And, I think that's nonsense. I think that's just complete nonsense. Yes, there's passion for the Blue Jays. They're going for the playoffs, and, but when it comes to hockey, our passion's unlimited. I just think that all across the board, it was just this feeling, this sort of blasé feeling of, I don't know, it just didn't seem that important. And don't get me wrong, if Team Europe would have beaten us, I would have been very upset. But more so for the fact that it was Team Europe than this was such an important competition, which I find myself pondering about. And again, questioning my passion for this tournament. Now, that doesn't mean that in 5 years from now, this tournament becomes the biggest tournament on the planet for hockey. But it's certainly not there yet. I found it really lacking in passion, and it was a bit sad. Even in the final, there were empty seats. They would pan across, not many, but that's you never see that. There was no talk of price of tickets being through the roof, like scalpers selling tickets for thousands and thousands of dollars. In the past, during very important tournaments, specifically in Canada, ticket prices, that's when you hear those stories. And, commentators use that to hype up the game before the game. They're like, the last price for a ticket is like $3,000. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. Oh my God. There was no talk of that. I don't know what the price was going for on the street. I'd love to know. But I can guarantee you it wasn't thousands of dollars. So again, if you look at it coldly from an economics perspective, for me, the street price of a ticket is often indicative of the popularity of a contest. And, I didn't see it here. I didn't see it. Not a good show on that front. And then, there's nothing the NHL can do about it. It's not their fault. It's not the team's fault. Like I said before, the rosters were packed with all-stars. Everyone was there. It just didn't have that ring of importance. And I think, a lot of the factors at play was the timing of the tournament, and there's a few other factors that I am going to cover later. I think hockey fans are aware that there's a bit too much of an economic angle to this tournament. Specifically, and since we're talking about regarding the Olympics, this World Cup was heavily promoted, heavily merchandised, heavily advertised, almost overbearingly so. Not almost, it was overbearing. And you just, you can't help but walk away and feel that it was a bit of a money grab. And, if that's the case, well, that would definitely explain a little bit of the lack of passion, and if you can see it and feel it, it certainly doesn't help the cause. So we'll see where that goes on that front, but definitely a factor that has to be kept in mind. Now, people say maybe we should move the tournament to February, March, and, the mid-season will crunch the schedule and we'll squeeze it in. And, there's arguments to be made for and against that. The fours are, the hockey level will be very high. Those players that are elite will have had almost an entire season under their belt, and, it'll be very high. I don't know if it'll add to it mattering. It might, because it is in the middle of the hockey season, so all of a sudden hockey's interrupted, and hockey fans would probably follow it very closely because hockey's interrupted. Whereas here in September there is no hockey interruption; it's more of a hockey edition. So a little bit more. It's much more different as far as shifting your habits or getting into a brand new tournament. Anyways, as well, there was a lot of talk about injuries during the tournament, and obviously when you lose one of your elite players, we're talking about local NHL teams here, it's going to make an impact on the team. Now, certain players impact certain teams differently. We saw people go down in this World Cup, Tyler Seguin for one, notably. And, no doubt that hurts Dallas. But, it doesn't, for example, hurt Dallas as much as us losing Carey Price, right? But nevertheless, any of these guys go down, it's going to hurt the teams. And when you're arguing, well, then maybe we should do it in February, well, you're still hurting the teams, right? You're still hurting a playoff push. If you're on the fringe and you're pushing, losing your elite player guarantees you pretty much missing the playoffs. If you're fighting for first, home ice advantage, this, that, or the other, or if it's a serious injury and the guy can't even play in the playoffs, well, that certainly affects your season. So I think my point with injuries is, for all the talk about injuries, let's just live with it. If we're going to have these international tournaments that we expect to be of such high level, we're going to get injuries. It's I don't know why we keep talking about it. There's no way to avoid it. If we want NHL All-Star games, these sort of pawn scrimmage games, then yeah, maybe there won't be injuries. But ironically, I bet if we did that, there would still be injuries, right? So let's just live with the fact there are going to be injuries in these tournaments, and different teams are going to have to deal with that if it happens to them, and it's unfortunate. I don't think anyone wants us to see us get rid of all these tournaments because injuries could happen that might affect our local clubs. And I think that applies to most Hab fans who probably have the most to lose. If Carey Price got injured in this tournament, I think we'd all be singing a different tune right now about this World Cup. I think most of us would hate it, not hate it, but just be like, how am I supposed to like this thing that took away our best player and killed my local team? I would feel that way, but that didn't happen. But you can't discount that possibility. So if we're gonna have the tournament, we're gonna have injuries. And if we're going to have injuries, well, let's just stop talking about it, have it, deal with it, and move on. Anyways, as far as the World Cup goes, there's no doubt when it comes to the economics of it, the profits are way higher for the NHL here. They control everything, pretty much. I'm not sure how the breakdown goes. But if you're comparing it to the Olympics, it's a whole different ballgame. Mentioned earlier, it was a bit of a money grab. I felt like it was. And, the merchandising was over the top. In particular, I found it was the most obvious during the final, the last game, when we won. When a team wins, everyone's out on the ice, they're celebrating, and, out come the caps, out come the T-shirts. And, Team Canada was no different. But it just looked different. For example, when Pittsburgh won the Stanley Cup, the players are ecstatic. They're so happy that, they're getting these caps and these T-shirts, but half of them don't even know what to do with them. Some of them are slumped over their shoulders. Sure, some of them wear them. Sure, but it's almost like the look on their face of ecstasy is all that really matters. They probably don't even know they're wearing a cap. Whereas in this final, it just kind of looked so mechanical. Like, here's your hat. Put on your hat, everyone had their hat on, and then, out came the scarf, everyone got a scarf, and everyone was sort of lollygagging around, and, and then, it just seemed like, and I can't blame the players. Sure, they were happy, they were ecstatic they won, but they weren't Stanley Cup happy. Let's be honest here. the celebration of that was laborious at best. They got the cup, and two or three players, went out with it, and then I seriously thought they were just going to go for the picture, and that would have been the end of it. It almost looked like they were going to stop doing that, but then, and finally another player took it, and they showed Babcock, and Babcock was encouraging them, like, go, be happy, and it's just so sad. It was sad a bit to watch. And they did. The players went through it, but it looked like they had to do it. It was very weird. And then of course Carey Price. They even played a joke on Carey Price. They gave it to him last. And I don't know. It just didn't seem like it was like people were hugging, yes, at first, but not the whole time. And anyone who watches hockey on a regular basis knows that wasn't a passionate victory. That was more of maybe of a relief victory, if anything. So the lack of passion was found in the players, and then they can't fake it. They can't pretend this is the world. This means everything to me. If you ask Sidney Crosby what's more important, the Stanley Cup you just won, or this new trophy, come on. It's not even close. So yeah, maybe that'll change over time. We'll see. But I don't know how to change that. If the fans start caring a lot, maybe the players will start caring a lot. But you have to get the fans to start caring a lot. And I'm not sure how you could do that. Now, if they take away the Olympics and this is our only tournament, maybe it'll grow in importance. But that's a bit of a risk, and we'll get to that in the Olympics section. And, it kind of leaves the NHL in this situation of, damned if I do, damned if I don't. What are my priorities? Do I want to expand international hockey, or do I want to make the most money? And I think the NHL has come to a point. They've pretty much had a two-pronged strategy on that. And they've come to a head where they have to decide if they want to make money or if they want to expand international hockey. And maybe doing both at the same time is not going to happen per se. So, we'll see what happens on that front. The hockey quality was excellent at the World Cup. At least it turned into excellent. The beginning was slow. A lot of these, particularly the Europeans, are coming over about a month earlier, maybe even earlier, to adapt to our time zone. They have to anyways for their regular season at some point. So, but you could definitely tell the Europeans, not necessarily Team Europe. They were probably the only European team that was ready, but definitely the Finlands and Swedens and Czech Republic. I mean, though Czech Republic had a good preseason, they looked a little slow, uninterested, rusty, and they definitely have to adapt with the time. But I will say this: the World Cup had very interesting teams. I enjoyed watching the North American team, the young team. That was fun. The Olympics, you can't do that. And Team Europe, a lot of players on Team Europe might have not had a chance to play in this tournament if they had been representing their native country. So I found the amalgamation of all the European players an interesting move as well. And obviously it produced a pretty darn good team. They really, really challenged Canada, which we'll get into in the next segment. The World Cup had interesting teams. That has something going for it. With the NHL controlling it, they can change the format. They can do anything they want. They can make it better. They can make it worse. But at least they can do what they want. And, something tells me that has something to do with it, which I'll get into in the Olympics section. And the final point I'd like to make about the World Cup is, you hear the argument that they're trying to expand the world game internationally. And I think for the World Cup, that is not what they're up to. And though they might give lip service to it, I think that's not the case, because when you find that, the only way to watch these games was on specialty sports channels, at least for Canadians. Now, I don't know what the situation was for international viewers, but I can guarantee you that if Canadian people had to buy specialty channels to watch these games, chances were the Europeans probably had a harder time to locate it on the old dial. And that's not a good thing. And the reason they're on specialty channels, as we all know, especially Canadians and probably Americans, I don't know who has what packages everywhere, but, you have to pay for that, and it means more money. It means more money for the NHL, And so, you follow the money with the World Cup, and there's way more money in the World Cup. And I think when the NHL looks at the World Cup, they're going to be very favorable upon it, even with all that lack of passion, just with the fact that, they get this tournament at a time when there's no hockey, and they can make good money at it. And that, for me at least, is probably all the wrong reasons to even start a tournament, and could be a huge explanation for the lack of passion from the fans, because it's obvious. It's obvious it's a money grab. We're watching specialty channels. I have TVA Sport to follow the Habs, so I was able to watch it. However, the English channels were Sportsnet, which I don't have. I've been considering getting it. But I didn't have it, so I couldn't watch it in English. Now, I'm French, so I don't mind watching TVA. It's fine. I probably would have watched TVA anyways. But people who don't have TVA Sport, at least in Quebec, and they probably don't have Sportsnet, were crap out of luck to watch this. So, when you see execs telling us, well, this is to expand the international game, we want to get a good tournament going, you find the reality in the minutia. And I mean, this isn't even minutia, this is a fact. It's pretty big, and it's not available widely for a lot of people to see. So grain of salt on that. I'm not calling them liars or anything, but I mean, I think they do believe this is expanding their international game. I don't know about that. I don't know how popular this tournament was in Europe. I would love to revisit it once the ratings come out, or if I hear anything different. There were reports on Twitter that the elimination of all the European teams didn't go over well in Europe. But it's Twitter, and that's for me the equivalent of I heard and people are saying, and 100 Swedes reacted negatively on Twitter, but maybe there was 120 people watching. I mean, I doubt that, obviously, but you know what I'm getting at. It's not a great metric to determine, the popularity of something in another country. Like, were people watching? Were people following? I'm not sure about that. I'm not even sure about that in Canada. In my own group, people openly said they've missed a couple of games. They, they followed it and, wants Team Canada to win, but when you're not making an effort to see the games, it's usually indicative of the importance it has for fans, especially diehard hockey fans, that if this was the Olympics being held in September, they would be there. They would have all their gear on, and they might go out to a bar, there might be a barbecue, there might be a tailgate, there might be something. None of that this year. None of that for this. Anyways, I keep stressing on the passion, the lack of it, but I find through history the best tournaments, the ones that, everyone looks upon fondly, are those that has that passion, has that, everyone cares about it. And, and if you don't have that, then I'm not quite sure what you're up to, apart from a money grab. And it's important to keep pointing that out because, in recent history of the NHL, it's no secret to hockey fans that priority number one has been pretty much to make good profit. That's not to say that they don't make good decisions on the hockey front and other various things. But many of their decisions are easily linked to economic reasons. And, it seems to be primarily the reason for, for example, for Quebec not getting a team. as an example, there's maybe no more room for that small market team that's not generating ginormous profits, but is sustainable, like sort of the Winnipeg model. Quebec, I think, could have pulled off a Winnipeg model, but they weren't given that opportunity because Winnipeg isn't generating a lot of money. And there you have it. There's proof everywhere of that when it comes to the NHL. So let's move to the Olympics. What's going to happen with that, or if it should be taken over or not, or replaced, or and like I was saying before with the Olympics, people care. People care about the Olympics. Even non-hockey fans, people care about gold medals. And when Canada has a chance at a gold medal, if you're a Canadian, you just care. And if it's hockey, even if you're not a hockey fan, you know how important hockey is in Canada. What happened in Vancouver was epic. Coast to coast, everyone was watching hockey, and of course, people will say it was in Vancouver, so of course. But to make my point that people care in this situation, I'll bring up an old Olympics, and unfortunately, it's bad memories for Team Canada fans. But the Olympics in Japan. Of course, we all remember Gretzky not taking the penalty shot and Mark Crawford hanging his head in shame as he should have. Horrible memories. But pretty much Japan, every game was on at 3 a.m. or even 4 a.m. I know I set my alarm and got up. We had a couple of parties a couple of times. People cared. People cared enough to get up in the wee hours. And, I think this was before PVR days. And so, you had to wake up and we'd watch it live. And, even though we got our heart broken, people cared. And as far as exposing your international game, that's what matters, is when people care, people will watch. As far as hockey goes with the Olympics, it's become a crown jewel event for the Olympics. So, I don't think the ratings are bad. I don't think there's any problem there. It does expand the international game. There's no doubt about it. Now, some people might say, well, there's only certain teams that play well enough to make it, and that is the truth. But I also think that there's been a lot of improvement. You're seeing a lot of teams that, 10, 20 years ago, if you go decade by decade by decade, I mean, there was 1980s, before the Miracle on Ice, Team USA was horrible. Now Team USA is a powerhouse, or used to be, but they're taking very seriously. And if you go every decade, there's different European teams that get taken more and more seriously. And now we're seeing teams like Switzerland and Germany coming along, and they can beat anyone any day. Sure, they can get blown out of the water, but and then now we're seeing French players coming along. So there's definitely been improvement in the international market as far as NHL quality players, and it'll only get better. And I think the Olympics is important for that. People put a lot of importance of seeing players, their home countries, go into the Olympics, and it's a source of pride for many people. And not to mention the quality of play at the Olympics, because of the scheduling, is just off the charts. The rosters are jam-packed with the absolute best players they can get, obviously. The season is put on hold, so all these players have been playing, heavy hockey for a while, and so they come in flying. And I really, really enjoy it myself. I very rarely complain about the quality. We can complain they lost in Japan and it was hard and this, that, and the other, but, it's not going to be easy in Korea. I believe Korea is pretty much in the same time zone as Japan. So, Team Canada isn't going to be it should be the favorite, but, they could lose. They got to adapt. It's not going to be easy. And not to mention, we as hockey fans, thank God for PVRs now, we can record the game and watch it at normal times. But of course, I think I'll still wake up. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and watch it live, because, it's different if, you wake up and you just see the score and the headline, and, you're a hockey fan, you like to cheer, and, that's why you're a hockey fan. So, I'd get up And so, I think that shows that people care and the quality is high, and the players care. They show up, they play high hockey. They all want to win the gold. They all want that on their mantelpiece. So there's no questions about that for the Olympics. The scheduling crunch, however, is a factor. Let's admit it. Those Olympic years, watching our teams play 3-4 games a week, it's tough on the players. It's tougher on some teams than others with all the travel. Again, injuries. Well, live with it. What are you gonna do? There's nothing you can do about it. Just live with it. Either that or advocate for no more international tournaments. If injuries are so important to you, then just stop it. Then don't cheer during the international tournaments, because then you're not going to have international tournaments if injuries. We'll just do the NHL and that's that. So forget the injuries. Yes, when you crunch a schedule, it's not helpful for injuries. There's probably a higher rate of injuries. People are pulling hammies and Charlie horses, and it's tough. You're playing so many games, but you gotta manage that. You gotta manage that properly, and then off you go to the Olympics. That's just the way it is, and it's been that way for a while. So it's not like NHL teams here are scrambling on those fourth years to figure out how to rest players, what kind of treatments they might need, and these are all professional teams. They know how to do it. Just enough with the injuries. Okay, they get hurt. Boo-hoo. I like these tournaments. I'm willing to take those chances. So these are all things that I think are all pretty positive things about the Olympics. And as far as expanding the international game, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. So if you're going to make the argument that you're interested in expanding the international game, as far as tournaments that are available now, the Olympics is the way to go. However, we will get into the negatives here. It does go internationally, but the NHL has very little control over this tournament, over this, process. They get way less money, obviously. I don't know what the breakdown is of money, but when you start talking about the Olympics, you have to start talking about the International Olympic Committee and about, the pot of money that they generate and how they divide it. And when you talk about the International Olympic Committee, in my humble opinion, you're talking about pretty much a legalized mafia here. So I'm pretty sure that the NHL isn't too happy just having to deal with these people in the first place. I guarantee you that the International Olympic Committee is trying to get as many brown nickels as they can to throw into that big pot they love. And, the NHL can go pound sand. And the NHL on their end are probably arguing that they deserve a lot more of the money. And, if we're going to be a crown jewel of this event, then, we need to have more of a say. We need to have more of a cut. And, if you're not going to do that, well, maybe we won't go. And so here we are in the situation, which is pretty much what I just explained. I mean, I'm not saying those are exactly the reasons. I'm speculating here. I wouldn't be shocked if that was exactly the reasons why the NHL is threatening to pull out. Frankly, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, cares more about money than the NHL. And, they probably make a lot of money from the hockey tournament itself. I mean, of course, they make a ton of money from just hosting these Olympics. But I think a big draw of hosting the Olympics is to be able to host a top caliber hockey tournament with the best in the world. So I think there's a lot of jockeying, a lot of power grabs and so on and so forth. And here we are, where we're kind of on the fence about, the NHL is threatening to pull out of the Olympics. And I can't blame them. Me personally, I can't stand the IOC. I think, this idea, and I'll just say it, the last few years, they've openly been going to more corrupt countries, more, obscure, weird countries, not obscure, sorry, I don't want to insult anyone, But, let's be honest, countries that could handle giving more money, bribes, pots de vins, etc., the Chinas, the Uzbekistans, all the Arab nations that seem to have unlimited money to throw at anything, uh, this is of grave concern for the NHL. Exposing yourself internationally for positive benefits is one thing, but are we going down a path of negative benefits? I don't know. The NHL should certainly consider that. Usually I'm one to slam the NHL if I can. And on this front, when I actually think about it, there's definitely probably points that the NHL are considering here, and that's certainly one of them. I mean, you're going to go to Korea. That's not the greatest location for hockey. Let's just say it. It's not going to expand hockey thoroughly into Korea. And for people who say, well, how do you know? You can't say that. Well, all the arguments that are being used to go to Korea, I again bring up Japan. And all those arguments were used for Japan. And I don't see the explosion of hockey in Japan how many years later. I think it's been well over a decade now. I don't see a Division I hockey league developing. I don't see Asian players coming into the NHL with, I just don't see it. So, maybe Korea will develop all kinds of hockey players one day, but I don't think that day is in the near future. So that argument kind of falls flat. And if you're going to tell me, well, then after we're going to China and Qatar and, the NHL might have reason to pull out, a quite good reason. So we'll see. They have to make that decision this year to get ready for next year. So whether they go or not, it's going to cause controversy, points for or against, and the thing about the Olympics, the fact that it's once every 4 years makes it not such a bad thing as far as logistics. I think, if it was every year, we'd already be out of it. But once every 4 years gives teams at least the opportunity to prepare to, they know the schedule will be crunched. They've already dealt with it. And, the scheduling thing, it's brought up all the time, and I've brought it up a few times, and it'll probably be the last time I bring it up, because really I don't buy it. These hockey players are they're the Ferraris of athletes, and if they're well maintained and well managed, you should be able to get by this. So yeah, that's what do we do? I guess that's what it comes down to. What's the NHL going to do? And I'm going to tell you what I think we should do. And what I think we should do is simple. I think we should do both, at least for the immediate future. I don't see why not. The Olympic year, we just don't have the World Cup. And, we do the Olympics instead. That way, everyone is happy. The NHL has a tournament they're controlling, they're making money off of. Whether they're expanding the international game or not, they can keep saying it whether they're doing it or not. And, as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind watching hockey in September. Now, whether that hockey will ever get important, I don't know. That's not up to me on a certain level. We'll see. But then to go to the Olympics, to do that once every 4 years for now is smart. We are going to watch it. Countries are going to care. I'm not going to be quoting Twitter to find out if Sweden cares whether they're winning or losing. I know they're watching. I know they care. And, as far as that goes, there's just no doubt about that. Now, what will the NHL do? Well, hence the title of this, Follow the Money. I'm betting they're going to get rid of the Olympics. There's no way they're getting rid of the World Cup. I think even with the lack of passion and a couple of empty seats, and they still made good money off this tournament. And when the NHL makes good money, I don't see why they would back off that. If you need proof, is they keep doing the outdoor classics. They've expanded it now to 2 a year, and they continue to make fistfuls of money over that. They didn't stop that, and Why stop something that could be sold as a success, right? It makes no sense. So I see them going ahead with the World Cup for sure, absolutely. And what that'll look like in the future, I don't know. One question I have is, will this tournament go to Europe, for example? And, if you're looking to expand your international game, then I think it should. Now, of course, North Americans never like that. You start playing on bigger ice surfaces and the game changes. But, that's just the way it is. And, the Europeans have to come here and they have to adapt, and they have to do it anyways for the NHL season. I understand that. So it'd be a little harder for the North Americans since, they don't and rarely ever do. But if you're looking to expand into the international game, we have to go to Europe and play hockey there with the best. And it has to be done with the best. And if you're going to keep the best on those teams, you have to give them an incentive. And right now, that incentive is to play in the Olympics. If you take away the Olympic incentives, you are going to have players dropping out, guaranteed. And then the tournament might lose some of its luster. Players that are, a little bit injured are going to not go. They're going to heal their injuries instead of playing injured, because it matters. And we're going to see a diminishment in the quality of the game. And once, you start seeing players that should be playing not playing, as a fan, it's obvious that its importance continues to dwindle. So what will the NHL do? We'll see. My bet is they'll follow the money. They'll make a partial mistake. They'll keep the World Cup going. They'll ditch the Olympics. And in the end, by ditching the Olympics, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot by hurting the World Cup. But, that's usually what happens when you end up chasing money, is it usually ends up, not paying out and not working out. And there have been tournaments in the past that have failed that were, frankly, money grabs as well. And that could be the case again. So we'll see. And that'll end this segment. Let's move into the good, the bad, and the ugly, the final World Cup edition. So the last segment was 43 minutes. I think I covered that subject pretty heavily. As well, you got it as a bonus. My dog's barking somewhere in the middle. I apologize for that. And there was no way in the world I was going to re-record 43 minutes of me randomly talking about this subject and hearing me continuously saying, Anyways, let's move on to the good, the bad, and the ugly. This will be the final World Cup edition. We'll look at the game and we'll touch on a few other subjects, but it'll be mostly the final two games between Team Europe and Team Canada. And of course, Team Canada won. And we'll start in the good, and we'll start with Carey Price. Perennial favorite, still in there. And I was a little disappointed again in the analysis of Carey Price's game. I was finding in my last episodes, my last podcasts, that they were overpraising him, for a couple of key saves, playing well, but just a little bit too excited about his play, in my opinion. Solid, nothing bad to say, just it just seemed a little overbearing on their praise of Carey Price. And for this final, let me be straight about this. I think he won the final for them. 2 games could have easily gone the other way. Team Europe was all over Team Canada. Carey Price had to make multiple important saves at all times of the games, and he was really on his game. I thought if there was an MVP for just the final, it's Carey Price. Crosby won the MVP for the tournament. Absolutely. For the entire tournament, no doubt about it. And but Carey Price won the final for Team Canada. I guarantee you if Crawford or Holtby had been in net, unless they're at their top of their game, there might have been a goal or two, that important goal or two. These games were very tight. And Carey held the fort. So if Carey plays like that for the Habs, it's starting to look very good for the Montreal Canadiens, because Carey Price is a formidable goalie, and he's starting to play like it. So excellent. Great job. And our other perennial favorite, of course, is Shea Weber. And I'm going to say this about Shea Weber. Over the World Cup, obviously, we're still a little raw from the PK Subban trade. I am too. So it's been a little hard for some people to come over and, just appreciate Shea Weber's game. Especially considering that Shea Weber and PK Subban, to me, are almost polar opposites on play styles. So it's a little hard for people to wrap their heads, and including myself. That's why I say that around this trade. You know, I'll get on that at another time. I will talk about this trade, but not now. What I will say this, though, people who are criticizing Shea Weber's play in this World Cup based on just his play, no comparisons to PK Subban, which happens a lot and is generally the point of contention, but just Shea Weber's play. He was easily the second best defenseman on Team Canada behind Doughty. And he was just solid, tough, a good hockey player. And believe me, if this went sideways, I would be the first to criticize it in any way. But if he plays like that for the Montreal Canadiens, I think even those people will get over it, even with PK Subban having good years in Nashville, because Shea Weber is a beast. Shea Weber is a solid defenseman, the kind that we haven't seen in Montreal in a long time, to be honest. I think of maybe Craig Rivet, and Shea Weber is 10 times the hockey player of Rivet, and just a solid defenseman, a guy who's going to hurt players. And, it's, I think by the end of the year, if he plays this way, there's going to be nothing but fans of Weber, including myself. Shea Weber in the good. And let's move along. Team Canada, champions. Got to put them in the good for that, absolutely. Now, for the first time in this tournament, they actually had trouble. And, I think that goes to the credit of Team Europe. When they had trouble, Team Europe was just playing great hockey. And we'll get to Team Europe in a second. But Team Canada, stumbled a little bit against Team Europe, but I'm not holding it against them at all. I'm giving that credit to Team Canada. Oh, dear Lord. I think you know what I meant there. Anyways, next year will be the same. If the World Cup continues, we're going to look at the same lineup pretty much. There might be a couple of changes. Duncan Keith didn't play. He was injured. He'll definitely play next year, especially if the Olympics are on. So he'll be back. Who could possibly be taken out in his spot? Well, I don't know. Maybe, in my opinion, probably Peter Angelo. I thought he played well, but a lot of cough ups, a lot of interceptions and things like that. And I think Duncan Keith's a better defenseman. The only criticism I would have of Team Canada's play as a unit would be their power play. I think their power play had a major problem, and that major problem was they were lacking a offensive defenseman. And, a sort of, they had Doughty, they had Weber, great guys on the power play, but they were missing that sort of offensive flair that you need to really, get a power play going. I think if Team Canada had a seventh defenseman of the caliber of Letang, or dare I say PK Subban, I think that would have made a huge difference for Team Canada's power play. And it's something they have to look at for next year in the Olympics. And I think they will. So Team Canada in the good. Congratulations. I'm happy. They're happy. We're all happy. Champions. And we'll move along. I said before, Team Europe, firmly implanted in the good. They were pegged as underdogs from the beginning. I thought they weren't underdogs per se. I mean, if you look at their team, they've got some excellent players on that team. Sure, there are some names that are lesser known, but and they just all played great, and that leads to the point that they had great coaching. They had coaches that established a system. In the last podcast, I explained they played the trap. heavily against other teams, their top lines, and it worked marvelously. They got to the final. And this is how good their coaching was. I expected them to trap against Team Canada, which I kind of pegged as a bit of a mistake. Not a mistake, but I thought Team Canada was going to break them on that. Apart from Crosby's line, which overwhelmed the team, they were so hot. So they did trap a little bit there. Instead, Team Europe countered with a bit of a two-man forecheck, and I think it caught Team Canada by surprise. It caught me by surprise. I expected more of a trapping game. A lot of turnovers, a lot of intercepted pucks, and that's some great strategy work on the part of the coaching staff. Babcock had to adjust, and good for them. Team Europe firmly implanted in the great show. I would be remiss not to mention Halak as well. I mentioned last week that he had to put two miracles together to win this tournament for the team. I don't think that happened. I thought he played great, but I don't think they were on the miracle level. Miracle level would have been stopping all the goals. That's what they needed. But still, he's played well enough to give his team a chance, and they almost took it. And so Halak definitely gets a tip of the hat. And finally, a bit of a surprise to me, I'm going to put the referees in the good. Now, I know we haven't had enough episodes to get to know me, if you will, but I'm not the biggest fan of NHL refereeing. I'm not a big fan of any sport that manages a game as opposed to officiates it. Hockey manages their games. If people wonder why something in a first period is a penalty and not in the third, that is the picture-perfect definition of managing a game. And it bothers me. However, I found in the World Cup there was a consistency from the start of it to the end of it. Sure, they missed some calls. Maybe were, too strict on others, but there weren't any controversies or moments where I was like, this is ridiculous, or, I can't believe this is happening. At least I didn't see any. And it was a nice change. I bring this up because if this tournament does ever go to Europe and we do have international refs, this could change. They ref differently. It was consistent across the board, and I don't think it took away from the play. So tip of the hats to the referees. Yeah. You won't hear that often here. I'll tell you that. Anyways, let's move to the bad. And this tradition of not hearing a lot of things often, you'll find, almost jokingly, you'll find the Boston Bruins. And the reason I put them in the bad is because I actually originally had them in the good. And that's the only time you'll ever hear me say that in my lifetime. And I said, no. All right, I made an executive decision. Anytime that I'm about to say something good about the Boston Bruins or the Toronto Maple Leafs or maybe the Ottawa Senators, they're automatically in the bad, just because it elicits that emotion from me. And so, and I always like to jab my fellow counterparts who follow these teams, and I am being polite. So the Boston Bruins in the bad. Yep. And the reason they're in the bad is because during this final, the two games, I just, the Boston Bruin presence in these two games was a little overwhelming for me. It bothered me. Just on Team Canada, the top line of Marchand, Bergeron, I was very happy about their performance. Don't get me wrong. I'm always a Team Canada fan first. But I won't lie to you. In the back of my mind at all times was the fact that these guys play on this team. And that bothered me. So you're in the bad for that. Marchand, there was actual talk about will he be a pest in the future now? And if I was to bet money, of course he will be. I'm not the biggest fan of Marchand. He does his job well. As a matter of fact, I'll say this. If Marchand stops being a pest, that's great news. That means he's trying to play different hockey. He wants to maybe now get 40 goals, and I'm all for that because that's not the kind of hockey player he is, and that would probably lead to trouble. So you go ahead, Marchand. You start thinking you can, break some records. Unfortunately for me and for Hab fans, I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll go on to being the Marchand I love to detest, and and I already spoke about Bergeron, that picture perfect opposite of what I think of Marchand. There's a player I actually respect, and I like that hockey player. I like the way he plays, and it bothers me he's on the Bruins. Just pure and simple. For me, Patrice Bergeron has always is the hockey player that we've always wanted from Thomas Plekanec, if I may be so kind, and never got. So which is unfortunate. So I like Bergeron as a hockey player. He just plays on the damn wrong hockey team. Not to mention Claude Julien's mug walking around the bench there. Just bothers me. Just like, these people, they're everywhere. And then not to mention Team Europe with their Chara presence, of course. Hab fans, it was fun hearing Toronto fans boo Chara. I think Chara, Mr. Nice Guy, according to only the Boston Bruins. I hear he's nice, but, And, Seidenberg, just a little cherry on top there, just so that, in case you have a little break there's Seidenberg too. And so that was really annoying for those two games. But I'm happy we won, and I'm happy they did well, at least the ones on Team Canada. And this will probably be the only time ever, but they're still in the bad. Just bad Boston Bruins. All right, and moving on in the bad is, I mentioned it in the previous segment, was this total lack of passion from the fans and a bit from the players too. Not total lack. I don't want to be too harsh. The fans, it's almost like they tried to get into it and it didn't work. But I don't know who to blame for that. I kind of do. I mentioned it in the segment before. I think fans aren't stupid. I think they know this tournament is sort of a precursor to it maybe replacing the Olympics. And I don't think hockey fans are going to be happy about that on a certain level. And I think, there's just too much money, a sort of money move on this World Cup that just leaves fans feeling a little, especially in September, feeling a little of the whatevers. That's how they feel, the whatevers, as the kids would say. So a little bit of bad for that, no doubt about it. Let's keep moving because this is turning out to be a long podcast. We're going to move to the ugly. And in the ugly, I'm going to reiterate last week's, the instant replay. Nothing happened against Team Europe and Team Canada, but as far as an overall, I thought they should be re-mentioned. Quickly and simply, they blew many a call. And that's the opposite of what the instant replay is supposed to do. So let's hope the NHL season they get it right. As well in the ugly, firmly entrenched, I mentioned it in the segment before, was the sort of this merchandising and advertising bonanza, out of control thing that, from like all the hockey players and commercials and the I explained in the segment before when we went and got the cup and the merchandising coming out, and it just leaves you numb a bit as a fan, and we're told we're supposed to really care about this, and it's just, yeah, okay, I understand why they do it in the Olympics. It's because we really do care, but it's just this one, it felt like it was being pushed on us. I just, I don't know what the solution is. We'll see, but that was a little over the top. And again, actually the next ugly leads sort of into this point, was the fact that these games were only available on specialty channels. For us in Quebec, it was TVA Sport or Sportsnet, both of which you have to pay. And I believe it was like that across Canada as well, with all the packages or whatnot. And, we're being told this is supposed to expand the international game, that this is one of the goals of this tournament. And when you sell the rights to the game to only specialty sports channels, I think you're on the verge of being called out on it. You're full of it. We'll see. We'll see what the future lies. But making it harder for people to access this tournament is not expanding the game in any way. None. You are filling your pockets with money. And fans know it. So I'm going to put that in the ugly. It is in the ugly. And finally, we're going to move out of the World Cup. I put this incident in the ugly, the Shaw incident, as Hab fans are calling it. And probably not for the reasons you think it's in the ugly. I'm putting it in the ugly because I think Beagle, the original guy who slew-footed Shaw, like, what an ass, like, one of the first exhibition games, you go up to one of the new veterans of the Montreal Canadiens and you just slew-foot them, and just a total a-hole move. I firmly implanted in the ugly. I can't wait. I hope Beagle makes the team and we see him again. I think Shaw might have a little thing to say to him, and I look forward to watching that game. And, I thought about putting Shaw in the ugly, but, I can't blame him. Here he is playing an exhibition game, and, 3/4 of the players are like 18 years old, and, all of a sudden he gets like judoed, slew-footed. And unfortunately, he gets up and another player skates right by him, like right in front of Beagle. So Beagle gets camouflaged for a second, and Shaw sort of zones in on that guy, thinking maybe it was him. And that was unfortunate because he ended up going after the wrong guy. Beagle definitely deserved retribution. If Beagle was lucky, Shaw would have ate him alive. Shaw was pissed off. But he caught wind of the other guy and, took a bad penalty, boarded a guy, and then started a fight. And, the only thing I'll say about that is I hope he doesn't do that often in the regular season, if ever again. It's an exhibition game. He got suspended for 3 games. I expected that. Totally deserves suspension. The only reason I bring Shaw up at all, and it's not even his fault, really, is I wish he got Beagle. Is that wrong to say? I know karma will eventually get Beagle, but I like karma to be a bit more instant, I wish he got up and that other guy didn't skate by and there's Beagle staring at him, Go at it. But that didn't happen. So, that incident does belong in the ugly. And it was definitely a driving factor in the news cycle in Montreal as far as Hab news goes. And speaking of Hab news, that's the end of this segment, and we'll move into the weekly Habitant, covering Montreal Canadiens news and the Montreal Canadiens training camp. Welcome to the weekly Habitant, your source for all Montreal Canadiens news. Another busy week for the Montreal Canadiens. They opened the official training camp. Rookie training camp finished last week. And there were 3 exhibition games already played, all televised. They were all good games. I enjoyed them. You have to remember, though, that even the regular training camp is sort of divided into 2. The first half being a lot of rookies interspersed with a few veterans to, be with them. And after that, it goes more towards the regular lineup. And to give you an idea, there have already been cuts made. I believe 10 or so players were cut today. No notable names, apart from Juleson, in my opinion, who's quite a high prospect for the Montreal Canadiens on defense. I don't think he's ready either. Nothing controversial happened today. And Fucali as well was sent down. We have a glut of goaltenders right now with Montoya and Condon fighting for the backup spot. So there's just no room for Fucali. He's going to go play in the minors, and he'll get a full season in. I will say this about Fucali. If ever, God forbid, Price gets injured, we just might see him again, because I'm not convinced that Montoya or Condon can handle a full season load. At least they've never shown so in their past. So Fucali will be getting a full season in the minors. No surprises there. As far as the 3 exhibition games go, I'm not going to go into the weeds or the minutia of it all. Like I said before, a lot of these players aren't going to play on the Montreal Canadiens this year. At least they shouldn't, unless the Montreal Canadiens have a terrible year again. And that happens, then yeah, they start experimenting and giving young people tries. But I'm really hoping that doesn't happen this year. It happened last year. A lot of these players we're not going to see, hopefully, this year, played last year even. Quite frankly, on the Montreal Canadiens starting lineup, there's, I would say, at most 3 spots. And when I say at most, I really am thinking there's only 2 spots. And, there's even a chance we see none of them make the team. Let's be honest. A lot of people are speaking of, McCarron, Laikanen, Sergachev. And, these are all players that are playing great. I think they are, at least. For sure, McCarron's been playing great. He's been one of the more sort of leading contenders in the media to possibly be on the team. I agree with that. It's been a long time that the Montreal Canadiens haven't seen a six plus giant center with, I think he has skill. It's ironic because I hear people knock the fact that he has no skill. When I watch him play, I think he has skill. He's scoring goals. He's making things happen. He's using his body. I don't understand that criticism on a certain level. But we'll see. We'll see. Is there room for McCarron on the Montreal Canadiens? I mean, if you're following the history of the last 2 decades, no. A good skilled big center has no room on the Montreal Canadiens. I say that laughingly because obviously it's exactly what we've been lacking for a long time. So even if McCarron falls on a 3rd, 4th line, I'm okay with that because if ever our power play stutters a bit or anything like that, here's a person we could put in front of the net who we can give a shot. I think he might be ready. At least from what I've seen. So we'll see on that level. As far as other players in the exhibition games that stood out, Bolya had a great game. And that's great news because a lot of pressure's on Bolya this year to sort of make up for the loss of offense from PK Subban. We're talking more along the lines of the puck movement and being able to carry the puck. With PK Subban gone, that's a huge loss for us. It could be a problem next year. We'll see. But a lot of people are putting the heat on Bolya to become that player. And in the game I saw, he was that player. He got 3 points. He was the quarterback of the power play. And it was really great to see. Great news for the Montreal Canadiens. I have nothing bad to say about Bolya. And in other news, Radulov, very exciting, as we expected. Just getting points. Nothing bad to say there either. It's a great start for Radulov. So really, those are the players that stood out for me in the regular season. Now, I could go into the weeds and say a few young players that I thought impressed me. But it doesn't seem really worth it. I'll give you an example. Last night, I watched Alexandrov play, and I thought he looked okay. And he got cut today. So, just to give you an idea of who is still on the team, I mean, they still have enough players to ice 2 full teams. A lot of more cuts will be coming next week. The exhibition games coming up, there's an exhibition game tonight against Toronto. And I think we'll see the last game where it'll be a majority youth. And we'll start seeing the veterans integrated into the lineup, definitely moving forward into the next exhibition games. Carey Price and Shea Weber are expected back this coming week. And they'll probably get their first ice time as Montreal Canadiens, to the excitement of all of us, I think. It would be important to also point out that the injured Sergachev, another prospect high on the Montreal Canadiens list, is back from injury. He's training. He's back on skates, and that's great news because that's a player that had a possibility to still has a chance to make the lineup. And I think Montreal Canadiens fans really want to see what he has against some higher caliber players, because he looked great in the rookie preseason camp. So he's back. So that's good news. Anyways, that's really all I'm going to say about the exhibition camp up to now. The exhibition camp. Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? There's a good game every night. But next week, we're definitely going to be looking at the different players that stood out, because the way it's looking, there might even be players that stood out that aren't going to make the team. So there might be quite a bit to talk about next week in our season preview. So we'll do that. And moving along, the team looks good, but it is mostly rookies, so we always have to keep that in mind. The power play looks, apart from that Bolya game, looks, it's hard to criticize a power play that, is relying on Byron or, we'll see what happens. I would be remiss to not mention in the news the whole meltdown of Andrew Shaw against Washington. He got suspended for 3 games. Basically, he got slew-footed and went after the wrong guy, boarded someone else, started a fight with someone else, and then basically asked the crowd to get into it. Anyways, I'll just throw that into the news. That happened. I mentioned it earlier in the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I already told McCarron. I think McCarron is really, and Sergachev. If Sergachev comes in and looks like that puck-carrying defenseman, it wouldn't shock me to see him on the Montreal Canadiens, which would be huge. So we'll see on that front. In other news, I was speaking last week about how we don't really know what's going on in Nashville due to the fact that it's Nashville and we don't really get their hockey games here in Montreal. So TVA was heavily promoting the fact that they have 14 Nashville games that they're going to show this year. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why. I'm really looking forward to following Nashville. I'm a real big Preds fan. No, I'm joking. We all know it's because of PK Subban, and so there's 14 Nashville games on TVA to watch PK Subban in action live. And I'll watch. I'm a PK Subban fan. Oh, I'll watch for sure. PK Subban is the most exciting defenseman in the NHL. I'll watch. That's worth a couple hours of my time, as long as the Habs aren't playing. So that's definitely news. Unfortunately, in the category of bad news, Lionel Duval has died at the age of 83 years old. For people who are my age, I grew up with this man watching hockey. He was the interviewer, mostly the interviewer, but he also did play-by-play for Soirée du Hockey on Radio-Canada, which used to be the French equivalent of Hockey Night in Canada on the CBC, until it got cut. And he did that for 30 years. And I remember him very well. He was one of those guys in those light pale blue coats, and he'll be missed. I think the hockey world will miss him. And from what I've heard, he was a really nice guy. He seemed like it on TV. You never know. But a loss for the hockey world, and definitely our thoughts and prayers, if that's what you do, are with the family. And yeah, we're going to start seeing the real team soon. It's coming. And really, that's the only news I have this week of the Montreal Canadiens. It's even though with the exhibition camp in full swing, there isn't much news that really made huge headlines apart from the whole Shaw incident. And the exhibition games, who's been standing out, who looks good, who might look good in a year or two. I think we'll do a little more of that next week. Some of those guys who will look good in a year or two are still on the team right now. We're going to see a lot of cuts, and next week I think we're going to, finally with the World Cup over, we'll have a full Habs show. So I'm actually looking forward to that. Anyways, we'll move to the conclusion. So, long show this week, another long show. They seem to be getting longer. I'm not doing that on purpose. I just record this. There's no script. I have notes, and I just go on rants or ramble on, or That's why I also say a lot. I apologize for that. I have to stop doing that. As far as this conclusion, I think I've said everything I've had to say this week. There was no Max Pacioretty. I'm very happy about that. Finally, after 3 weeks of what seemed nonstop talk about him, it's been quiet. And as far as next week goes, on next week's podcast, big show. It's going to be the season preview show for the Habs. I have a feeling it might go very long. I'm planning on having a guest on as well. He's a friend of mine and knows a lot about hockey. And we're going to look at the Habs in depth, probably player by player even, and look at the future of the Habs too. So we will get into the weeds of the rookies that played, because they are showing us quite interesting promise that could be paying off for us in the years to come. And we should look at that and speculate on what could happen. But next week will definitely be the season preview. We'll look at the entire NHL as well. Maybe make some predictions on teams we see up at the top of the standings. Maybe even make predictions on players that we see at the top of the points leaderboard. It won't be a show for poolers per se. I won't be doing anything like that. But, it'll definitely have a lot of interesting bits. And I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, I wish you all an absolutely wonderful week. Continued sunshine, continued coolness at night. This was the Angry Habs Fan Podcast Show. Wishing you all a fabulous evening.